That's pretty rare today, so we appreciate y'all coming up. We have a bunch of distinguished guests out there, but we'll be recognizing one in particular here in just a few minutes. This is the third meeting of the Joint Committee meeting for Veterans, Military Affairs, and Public Protection. I want to thank my co-chair for being here, Senator Embry. And we do want to introduce real quick, this is Logan Schaaf, and he is going to be joining us. He is going to be help Jessica with the day-to-day operations for Veterans, Military Affairs. Recent graduate from UK, and so we are glad to have you, Logan, and look forward to working with you there. So, all right, well, we're going to go ahead and let's call roll real quick. And please, for those of you that are out there in cyber world, please just announce if you're in your district or in your office, if you would, for our records. Madam Secretary.
Senator Higdon.
Present remotely.
Thank you. Senator Kerr.
I'm here in my district.
Thank you. Senator Meredith.
Present in the room.
Thank you. Senator Mills.
Here in the room.
Thank you. Senator Parrott. Senator Parrott. Senator Schroeder.
Present remotely.
Thank you. Senator Smith.
Present at the Capitol.
Thank you. Senator Westerfield.
Here from Crofton.
Thank you. Senator Wilson. Senator Yates. Representative Blanton.
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Bratcher.
I'm present up here in the annex office.
Thank you. Representative Dossett.
Present remotely from the 9th District.
Thank you. Representative Duplessis.
Present remotely.
Thank you. Representative Freeland.
I'm present remotely from my district.
Thank you. Representative Fugit.
Here in the room.
Thank you. Representative Gentry.
Present from my district in beautiful Highview.
Thank you. Representative Goforth. Representative Gooch.
Here in the room.
Thank you. Representative Hart.
Here in the room.
Thank you. Representative Koch. Representative Lewis.
Present remotely from the 14th District.
Thank you. Representative Maddox.
Present from the 61st House District.
Thank you. Representative McCool.
Here in the room.
Representative Minter.
Present from the 20th District.
Thank you. Representative Sharp.
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Stevenson. Representative Tackett Lafferty.
Present in the room.
Thank you. Representative Wesley. Representative Wheatley.
Here in the room.
Thank you. Senator Embry.
Here in the room.
Thank you. And Chair Thomas.
All right, and I'm here. Thank you so much. If we could have our distinguished vet come up, and would you mind leading us in the pledge, sir? In just a sec, come up to the center table and everyone stand. We're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance, and I've asked Senator Mills to go ahead and do a prayer right afterwards. Thank you, sir. You are welcome to have a seat anywhere there. We'll be with you in just a sec. We just have last minute house cleaning. For those members that are here and in Cyber Worlds, you should have received the minutes, copy of the minutes. If I can entertain a motion. I have a motion and a second. And is there anyone opposed instead of me saying all in favor of? All right. The motion passes. All right, now we have a distinguished vet here that is a constituent, I think, of Brother Fugit. And so I will turn the mic over to you and go from there.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce to you, Mr. Chairman and the committee, to a friend of mine, Brother John Dodd. He is from the big city of Benham, Kentucky, down in Harlan County. And I guess in 2016, when I was first running for office, I met Brother John, and he's more than a constituent. He's become a real close friend of mine. He's retired 20 years of service for the Army, served 3 tours in Vietnam, 3 tours in Korea, served as recruitment officer. He also pastors a church at Jenkins United Methodist Church, and it's just good to have him here with us. So, Brother John, if you'll make sure your microphone is on, there's a little button right there on the bottom, and it'll turn green when you... Sure you can.
There it is. It's brighter.
All right. And Brother
Now,
John,
I
the
guess
floor is
that's
yours.
it.
After hearing the pledge, you might not need a mic. Go ahead.
Well, I have been blessed. I'll say that. But anyway, my name's John Dodd. I come from a family of 8. Father was a coal miner. And I attended 4 different high schools in Harlan County before I ever got out. And I attended Hall, Benham, Cumberland, and Lowell High School, and then back to Cumberland. And it's just, I'm sentimental, okay? So, and it's really an honor to be here. And I have 3 sons. My oldest son was killed in a car wreck in '98. My middle son, Michael, was a retired sergeant major from the Army. And my son, Jamie, he works in the industry. Industry is making car parts. My wife and I, Shirley, and our wiener dog, Trooper. But what I do in Harlan County, when I came back to Harlan County after being away from years, I'm also a retired educator from the Wayne County Board of Education in Monticello. I wore different hats there. I coached, I taught. I was the principal of a night high school for dropouts, which I'd love to see one of them in every county in Kentucky, because it's a good thing. But anyway, my role with the board to preserve military heritage in Harlan County is my pet peeve. I've got a board, or I don't have a board. We have a board. We're a 501c3 organization, and we name roads and bridges in honor of deceased veterans. And we work hard at that. If you're ever in Harlan County and you go by, drive on the road, and you see a road or a bridge named after a veteran, you can say that veteran lived in this community. And we love what we do. We had 235 that were either killed or wounded during World War II. We had 50 in Korea, and we had close to 40 from Vietnam. And we had 1 from Afghanistan, 1 from Iraq, and 1 from Kuwait. And we do this to honor these people because, and I want to go back to World War II. And if it wasn't for winning World War II, we would be speaking other languages today instead of English. And I'm so proud that we had the leadership that we had. back then, even though at times it seemed like one general favored another or whatever. But my hero from World War II is George Patton. And because he was a warrior, he was a fighter, and he did the things that needed to be done to win the war. And when he run out of supplies and that and had to wait, when they were resupplied, they gave the enemy time to regroup and ambush them. And I had a third cousin that was killed with the 80th Infantry Division in World War II. And I want to share this with you. If you know of a military unit, you don't have, and you knew somebody that served in that unit, and you knew what date they were killed or wounded, you can go online and punch in that unit. And the history of our military will tell you exactly where that unit was at on that day. And I research a lot of this and do a lot of things with it. And we're very careful who we put on our, or we add to our board. We've got our regular board, which has our trustees, our chairman and that, and then we got our members. Our circuit judge is an honorary member. He had a dad that was killed in World War II. And he's a tall, slender guy, and he's the one that cuts the black plastic off of the signs. But anyway, I'm getting away from what I was wanting to talk about. We had a guy by the name of James McCoy in World War II who was a PFC in the Philippines. And the Japanese occupied this one mountain, and it was made up of where it was coal or some other mineral that they mined on top of that mountain. They were told to go take that mountain, said you can take it in 2 weeks. Well, it ended up taking about 6 months because the Japanese had reinforced the doors and that. They couldn't use flame throwers, they couldn't use grenades. And the reason that they had to take that mountain was when General MacArthur returned to the Philippines, that mountain had to be secured to protect his right flank. And in the day in Harlan County, we have always been loyal military supporters in Harlan County. I recruited for the Army altogether for about 11 years. And I was talking to some people here. I recruited out of Somerset 3 different times. I recruited out of Cleveland, Ohio one time for 3 years. And I can say this as a recruiter. When people go to compare Army recruiters to car salesmen, I get a little upset because I know what I did. And I helped a lot of kids along the way. And I helped restore the numbers to our recruiting command, and our kids that served in our military. And I love this country. I love Kentucky. And I've got friends all over. Everywhere I was stationed, or everywhere I worked, I made friends. And there's nothing in this world, folks, that can replace friends, close friends. All of you here are elected officials, and you've got friends out there. You got friends that would go, Lord forgive me, that would go to hell and back for you, and help you out. But this thing that we do down there, naming roads and bridges after our deceased veterans, I would love to see this program in every county in Kentucky. When I came back to Harlan County from Wayne County, we didn't have it in Wayne County. And I would go to Letcher County and Perry County. And here's all these roads and bridges named after veterans. That is when I got the group together and we started this organization. And up to now, we started, and along about the time Brother Chris came along, about 2016, we started this program. And it's been about 5 years, and I want to thank the people who serve our districts, a representative from Middlesboro that's got Everts, Lynch, Black Star, and Brother Chris with what he's got. Getting these bridges and roads named. Now, don't get me wrong, because I'm sitting here among a whole group of politicians, okay? And I love politicians, don't get me wrong. But I love my fellow veterans, and that's who I like to see roads and bridges named after. And I thank you for your time and for tolerating me and putting up with me. I thank you.
Thank you, Brother John. I want you to come up in front of the table. I'm going to come down and present you with something and get a picture too.
As long as it ain't a grenade or dynamite.
Don, as he's doing that, we have the co-chair of transportation in the room, Representative Randy Bridges, and he'll attest that last year we put that sign naming for bridges and roads kind of on a hiatus a little bit, but we are working on trying to revamp that.
Ken
So.
Upchurch told me about
Ken
it.
did, so
and
okay.
I wanted to choke him, but I did.
Well,
I told him I could wait another year.
just wait for 2.0. It'll even be bigger and better next time. So.
Well, it's I think it's something that, like I've said, that's needed all over the state.
It is. It's very important. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, this is Senator Smith. May I make a comment?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Is this Brandon? Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Dodd can't see me there. We always called him Mayor Dodd. Mayor Dodd, this is Senator Smith. I'm remote today, but I can attest to this gentleman's long-term service to the region. Arlen County had been in my district almost 2 decades ago, and even then, Mayor Dodd was already tired from working for this region, but he's been nonstop since then. And I wish I could be in there with you today to shake your hand and tell you how much we appreciate the type of work you've done in Eastern Kentucky. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get into the agenda. We don't want to leave this next guest hanging. I know he's a busy man, so and I believe he's on cyberspace with us. So we want to welcome Brigadier General Lamberton, our Adjutant General, and we're always glad to have you, sir. You have a standing invitation to always come talk with us. So with no further ado, we'll let you kind of report on what's going on and everything.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I can hear you and can see you. Can you all hear and see me as well?
We can.
You can?
Yeah.
Perfect. I wanted to chime in real quick as well to Representative Fugate's distinguished visitor, that it certainly caught my attention, having heard multiple tours of Vietnam and Korea. So anybody who served in the military in those types of environments very much has my respect as well, because I can somewhat empathize with what they've been through. Today, I wanted to give you all kind of an overview of what's going on with your National Guard at this junction, and a couple of specific topics, because they're near term. I think they're of interest with everybody involved. But as everybody's tracking, you know, we've all been responding over the past year and a half to some aspect of the pandemic. And we've been engaged with a variety of support activities. I believe at the high point, we had just about 1,000 soldiers and airmen who are engaged in some aspect of pandemic response. And this is everything from providing security at hospitals to providing mobile vaccination teams, of which are still out there now and operating, providing support at the drive-through testing sites. We're still administering vaccinations and some other dynamics, As some of y'all might be aware of, we've also had folks operating in some of the food pantries around the state, and that in particular, as you know, a lot of the folks who typically volunteer to work in the food pantries, that they tend to be elderly folks, so they are the more at-risk groups due or for the prospect of exposure to the coronavirus. And so quite simply, as the virus became more prevalent about a year ago, those folks backed away from the food pantries, and our folks were able to step up and engage with them. As you know, a couple of unique things to the Guard in particular, we, for the first time in our history, and I think actually more than likely into the country's history, were also engaged with the election process, having had Guardsmen involved with both the primaries of a year ago and the general election. And as some of y'all are probably tracking as well, none of our folks were dressed as I am today. They dressed in civilian clothes. I simply thought it wouldn't be all that appropriate to have a soldier standing by a voting booth. It might give the wrong impression, but that worked out well. Additionally, some of y'all are probably very much tracking where we sent folks up to DC in response to the events following 6 January, had a number or several hundred soldiers up there in DC for a while responding to it. And quite simply, what I'm getting to in particular, at the same time that we are engaged with each one of these activities, our 206th Engineer Battalion was deployed to Western Iraq and Syria. And some of y'all might be tracking that was during the time frame that Iranian missiles rained in on them. And now, fortunately for our folks, none of them were hurt. We did have a number of minor head injuries, but nothing physically that was enduring, and everybody came back from that deployment. And also by the way, during this same time frame, we had a medical company that was deployed to Poland, and it was part of the U.S. and NATO's Operation Inherent Resolve. If you aren't familiar with that operation in particular, it was a NATO operation that was stood up to stem the Russian intrusion into the Ukraine, which is still an ongoing concern and consideration and dynamic. With folks involved with that, we had a few hundred folks who were down on the southwest border engaged with that situation. And again, oh, by the way, it hasn't stopped yet, that right now we're standing up a group of about 200 soldiers to deploy in the upcoming months for a security mission in Kosovo. We also are standing up another group of about 200 soldiers to deploy to another security mission over in the Horn of Africa. That's along the eastern African coast, if you aren't familiar with the area. Plus, we were still anticipating just in a little over a month, so in October, sending down another group of about 210 soldiers to the southwest border area. So sure as heck, I feel that we've been gainfully employed over the last 18 months. And this may sound kind of trite in a way, but I genuinely believe that for the variety of engagements, whether it's here in the States or overseas, or an operational response, or a response to some sort of pandemic support engagement, that you would be proud of the men and the women, the soldiers and the airmen who are into the National Guard. And I certainly know from my perspective, I'm proud to serve as part of their formation. And it's because of the quality of the folks that we've got in the Kentucky National Guard today that it simply makes it a professional and an organization that I believe the entire Commonwealth can be proud of. A couple of specific things I wanted to get into as well. And for anybody who's either physically there in the meeting room or on cyber, listening into it. If there are questions that pop up, feel free to go ahead and bring it up. But the first thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was vaccinations, and in particular because of the declaration by Pfizer and it no longer being an emergency use authorization, but the FDA having completely approved it for use. And I'm sure that a number of folks are also tracking that not only the federal government, but specifically the Secretary of Defense and DOD have come out with statements that the SecDef specifically has said, and this actually came up about a week or so ago, that the 15th of September would be a deadline for military forces to receive the vaccination. Now, that was the first word that it came out. And what do I want to add and clarify with that? Subsequently, that statement was identified to mean only the active duty military. That's across all the branches: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. Am I hearing a question? Okay, I'll continue on.
Hold on one sec. Representative Gentry, are you happen to be out there? Representative Gentry? Okay, can you just go ahead and mute your mic, and we'll note that you're on this meeting. All right, General. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine, sir. Again, I invited anybody, if they have a question, to go ahead and let me know. So anyways, as I was stating, the Secretary of Defense did give a deadline for all active duty forces to be vaccinated, and this was prior to the Pfizer declaration yesterday. For us in the Guard, no deadline has been specified at this junction. Now that Pfizer has come on board, and specifically for us in the Kentucky National Guard, all of our vaccinations were from Moderna, under which we're still working under the emergency use authorization. My expectation, and this is from consulting with the higher ups at the National Guard Bureau, who in turn have been in touch with the DOD, is that when or not until Moderna likewise is also no longer under an authorized use authorization, then it would get mandated for National Guard members, specifically in Kentucky, and some subsequent suspense date would be determined for that. Now, that having been said, that there are a couple of things that I want to qualify for folks as well, because there have been some rumors and for the application of it. For us in the Kentucky National Guard, our current vaccination rate is about 43% of the force. And the rest of those who have not been vaccinated at this junction, they've been given an opportunity to do so, that they've turned it down for a variety of reasons. It's a pretty much same rationale as the general public have not been vaccinated at this junction. For our folks, I mentioned just a little bit ago some of the upcoming deployments that are on the horizon. So as some of our folks deploy and they transition from a Title 32 state guard member to a USC Code Title 10 active duty member for some of these deployments, whether it's domestic or overseas, they will also be subjected to the mandate of all active duty soldiers being deployed. So upon those deployments, they will also be required to get the vaccination. And we've communicated with our folks on that and working to ensure that everybody's tracking that. One other aspect I'd suggest as well is that when it does come down for vaccinations to be mandatory in the National Guard, we've heard such things, that a soldier could turn down the vaccination. And as an example, by regulation, there is even a religious exclusion that a service member, a guardsman in particular, can claim for not wanting to get vaccinated. Of course, if they claim something like that, then it has to go up through the chain of command for approval. But what I would get to there is that for all of us, when we come into the military, National Guard, active duty, reserves, and regardless of what component we're in, and for some of you on the committee there who've been a service member as well, you may readily recall when you initially go to basic training, one of the things that you're just kind of filing right down a line of medics who one after another are giving you various vaccinations to be included in the military. And in particular, that's because some of the places that service members deploy to in the world, health-wise, are not the safest places to be. A malaria shot, that's a fairly common thing. And while not a great concern for us here in the U.S., other parts of the world, it is a very deadly disease. So part of military service is the prospect of going to these locations. I would offer, and this is Hal Lamberton saying this, that if a service member is not inclined to receive a vaccination for their own health and the health of their fellow service members, especially if they go to some of these locations throughout the world, then their viability for military service is compromised, and quite literally it becomes a readiness issue at that junction. That somebody may be in uniform, but if they are not deployable because they haven't had the vaccination when it is completely authorized, then the prospect of an administrative separation could come into being. And what I want to qualify with that when I talk about an administrative separation is I'm not talking about any type of a punitive separation. I, as the Adjutant General, would not take any sort of negative action for somebody who says whether it's for their some unproven medical concern of theirs or something, if it's not a credible statement, but quite simply they state they don't want to get vaccinated. Well, they're no longer potentially a viable soldier. I will not punish the person for that justification, but we are looking at the prospect of their being separated from the military because quite simply their viability as a guardsman, as a service member of any other branch has been diminished. That said, and Mr. Chairman, I would just kind of pause for a moment in case anybody might have any questions in reference to vaccinations or our status or the prospect of receiving them.
General, thank you. We do have, we have a couple of questions. I was going to ask, is the activation of the National Guard, is that dependent on the state of emergency declaration when you activate?
Yes, sir. And let me answer that and build a framework for you as well. Like for the emergency declarations, most of the scenarios that would come under that would be exactly as we're doing right now. And the pandemic response are typically the way a lot of folks think of that the National Guard is responding to some type of a weather-related disaster. And our engagement with that, and with the small caveat, is very much contingent upon a natural disaster declaration. That the caveat being, some situations we can see something coming. For example, we see, especially for some coastline states, that they see a hurricane, they know it's going to impact, and so it simply passes a common sense test to go ahead and activate some of their soldiers in advance of that impact to prepare the community for it. But that is with the anticipated emergency management declaration, activating them. The other aspect that I'd say that there are situations, and I'll get into this in just, well, I'll get into it now to help answer your question as well. All of us, by virtue of the national news, we're tracking the exodus or the outflow of refugees coming from Afghanistan right now. You know, we've seen the news reports and the initial aircraft and how crowded they were and flying the refugees to various locations. This past Friday evening, literally at 5 p.m., our CRG, our contingency response group out of the Air Wing in Louisville, was activated to go up to Wisconsin, specifically to run a reserve airfield, Volk Airfield by name, because Wisconsin, and specifically Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, is one of the locations that some of these refugees are being flown into. So that was not a declaration of emergency, but that was an example of our airmen being federalized directly under DOD authority in response to that situation, more of an operational dynamic than an emergency type situation, albeit with a certain level of urgency to it. And that you are tracking, and I know I'm going off on a segue a little bit, but again, just building into the framework to answer your question. As of right now that I'm aware of here into the States, there are 4 locations that refugees are coming to the States from Afghanistan. The first one I mentioned, Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. The other one is Fort Bliss. Next is Fort Lee, and the final one that I know of is Mcguire Air Force Base, which is co-located with Fort Dix in New Jersey. These are the only locations that I'm aware of right now. But again, I offer that as an example where guardsmen and in a fairly quick notification can also be activated. But again, that's in a federalized action as opposed to a state level action, if that makes sense, sir.
It does. Thank you so much for that explanation. That does help a lot, and you have a busy plate there. So we have a couple questions. I think the first one was from Senator Higdon. And
yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It takes me a while to get tuned back in here. Thank you, General, for your comments today. Certainly appreciate it. And you mentioned that, your National Guard troops are, deployed around the world and across the country. And I certainly appreciate that and appreciate all their service to our country and our state, because you're also deployed around the state in time of emergencies. And we appreciate that. Also wanted to mention, General, and to thank you for something you didn't mention, that September and October are pretty much festival time in Kentucky, and a lot of festivals across the state. And you have made available the Kentucky National Guard to help many of those festivals with traffic control, and their presence there is much appreciated. I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of all those communities that you share and allow those National Guard troops to help those local communities during those festivals.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Senator. We do have another question by Representative Gooch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a comment and then maybe a couple of questions. And General, first let me say thank you for your service. And I know that you have a difficult job, and any comments that may be negative certainly are not directed at you. Let me say I'm not someone who's an anti-vaxxer. I'm vaccinated myself. I encourage all of my constituents, all of my family members to get vaccinated. I think it's probably very important in a way that we try to help beat this thing. But I think that one of the problems that I have is that when we start mandating something to really our real heroes, and even to our citizens out there, these folks are our citizens. And we're mandating to them. We haven't mandated vaccines yet, but we've mandated some instances where they have to quarantine. We've mandated instances where they have to wear masks, instances where they have to close their business, instances where they've had to do many other things. And I think that we ought to realize that when we force things on our citizens of this country and this state, those decisions shouldn't be made in a vacuum. And we have a commander-in-chief in this country who in 6 months has allowed 1 million people to walk across the border untested, unvaccinated, and is shipped everywhere in this country, and we don't even know where they're being shipped to. Many of them we know are positive for COVID. And I guess the two questions that I have. One is, have we in Kentucky sent, our National Guard to the southern border? And the second question is, how as legislators can we find out how many of the people that have come across that southern border illegally have been sent to Kentucky? Thank you.
Sir, this is Hal Lamberton again. I apologize, but I lost the connection for a little bit, so didn't hear anything or wasn't able to engage for about the past 90 seconds. But I'm fortunate that I get to work with some smart IT folks, and I'm back with you at this junction. So I'll need to be clued into any other questions that just came up.
We'll let Representative Gooch, do you mind repeating it?
Okay. All right. Well, I hate to have to repeat it because I might not be able to. I just want to make sure, as I said earlier, that I certainly have great respect for you and your service. But what I was saying was that when we mandate on our service people, our heroes out there, and then even our citizens as well, different types of things they have to do. In many instances, they had to close their businesses. They had to maybe quarantine in certain instances. They had to wear masks. They had to do lots of things. Sometimes even have to be tested or whatever, and that's okay. I'm for the vaccine. I want everybody to get the vaccine. But what I said was that when we mandate to our citizens, and specifically our volunteers in the National Guard and reserves that have done, that really are our heroes, that shouldn't be done in a vacuum. And my comment was that our Commander-in-Chief has allowed 1 million people to walk across the southern border in less than maybe 6 months, untested, unvaccinated, many cases put on a bus and shipped all over the country. And I see that as, it just makes me feel like that, are those people really serious about fighting this when they're doing something so blatantly super spreader as the events that we've seen on the southern border? And then the two questions I had was, one, have we sent our Kentucky National Guard to the border? And the second one was, how do we as legislators find out how many people have been sent to Kentucky that are people who walked illegally across our border, many cases untested, unvaccinated, and we know that many of them probably have a higher positivity rate than our citizens here in Kentucky. Where can we find out that information? Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. I'll share with you what I know, and I understand your comments. Currently, we do have Kentucky Guardsmen who are working on the southwest border. They're due to rotate back in the upcoming weeks. And then in October, we're also scheduled to send down another 210 soldiers. And they're primarily going to be working in what I'd call a command and control capacity. And that they will have command responsibility for a lot of the National Guard members from other states who are working in the border area. to your question specifically of folks who crossed the border illegally and what is their health status, to be straightforward with you, that is out of my purview and the information I have available. I would strive to contact the Department of Public Health and see how they could respond to it.
Thank you, General. We do have one more question, it looks like, at this time. Representative Sharp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Absolutely terrific. Thanks, sir.
Awesome. Thank you for your service. And I want to kind of talk about the DC activation for a minute, if I can. Our National Guard troops, what missions were they performing in DC?
They changed over time, but pretty much the majority of the missions were simply standing security, and then also working as what we call a QRF, or a quick reaction force. If suddenly some particular location had to be augmented with more soldiers, they were on an immediate recall status to go from there to wherever the incident may have occurred.
I'd seen some reports on that some of these troops out there were not provided with any self-protection equipment. Were our National Guard troops, were they able to have some sort of self-protection items with them?
It was contingent upon where they were. Some folks, for example, did have self-protection equipment because they were positioned in a situation in which they might have been threatened. Some other folks, for example, were working supply and distribution and command and control logistical situations in which they were not, if you will, at the forefront in which any confrontation would take place. It wouldn't have been appropriate to tailor those folks with self-protective measures.
I understand the logistics and supply and command and control. The people that were on the front lines, what type of self-protection items did they have?
Typically, we got everything from what I simply call our battle armor, everything from a helmet to IBA or individual body armor.
Were they provided with any sort of sidearms or rifles or batons?
That equipment went up there with them, but it did not have to be distributed to the soldiers because they were not put in a duty position that would lead to a confrontation. So the weapons were there and would have been issued if they'd been put in a confrontational dynamic.
Okay, so the people that were standing security that were on watch on security, they were not armed.
I'm sorry, say that again, sir?
The people that were on security missions, standing security, you had said that they were on at different posts performing a security mission. They were not armed?
That would have to be broken down position by position, and I can't answer that without digging it into the situation further. I can dig into a breakdown position by position as it was controlled and identify the specific arming status and get that to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
All right. I don't see any other questions. General Lamberton, we had slide presentations. I think some of these items you've kind of covered. Is there some other items that you'd like to talk about? We want to give you as much time as you need, or does that conclude everything?
Sure, sir. There were some slides, but we've addressed that conversationally. That there are a couple of other things that I want to be sure that folks are aware of. And again, you may have heard this in the news already, but where our folks in their response to the pandemic have been federally funded over the last 12 plus months, that federal funding was due to end with the end of the federal fiscal year, meaning this 30 September of next month. Well, anyways, just about 10 days ago, that federal funding was continued. and it's continued to the end of the calendar year, the end of December in particular. Basically, what that enables us to do is to continue some of the same functions that I've already verbalized with you, from the mobile vaccination teams to our folks working in the food pantries to our folks working with others in the hospital settings. And quite simply, for example, where I mentioned specifically the food pantries, and there's a cluster of them there around Hardin County and Radcliffe and E-Town, where they virtually would have had to shut down without the continued support of our folks. So this way they're able to continue their operations. And speaking with the lady who's kind of the spokesperson for several of them, it's their belief that they will be able to receive grants that will enable them to hire others in the beginning of the next calendar year, 22. And then quite simply,
I do not know why we're getting feedback.
Can you all still hear me? I'm getting some feedback here.
We are too. It sounds like it's okay now. Sorry about that, sir. We're really testing your limits there.
But what I wanted to also add, what this continued federal funding does do for us, as that you may have heard recently from the governor's press release, where there's a significant concern with all of the hospitals across the Commonwealth about not having enough staffing to enable them to reach their capacity, their bed capacity. And several hospitals have already met their capacity based on the staffing. What I'm getting into is that the hospital staffing is a urgent issue with many, and I would offer in the upcoming days and weeks even a greater issue. So at the moment, we've stood up 5 teams, 5 groups of soldiers that are going to go to 5 different locations around the state to augment the staff of those selected hospitals. I was on the phone with the governor earlier this morning. We're going to additionally stand up 2 more teams. So basically, that'll bring us to over 100 soldiers who are going to be scattered to augment the staffing at various locations. And the anticipation, the concern is that dynamic will continue to increase. And so we're reaching into our formations to get other soldiers to bring them together, to send them out to wherever the need may be greatest. Because, again, this isn't just a urban dynamic or rural dynamic. It's facing multiple hospitals across the different hospital systems we got throughout the Commonwealth. But that is also facilitated by the continuation of the federal funding coming to us. And really, sir, subject to any further questions from your all's part, that's kind of the bulk of the immediate information. I know that I owe the one representative a more definitive answer of what specific security positions our folks had and their arming status, and I will get that to the committee and go from there, subject to any further questions from anybody.
General, thank you so much for being here this morning. I had a history teacher that used to always tell us, he said, any important events around the whole world always had a tie to Hopkinsville. But I would expand that to has a tie to Kentucky, because it sounds like we are actively engaged in things all over the world. And we appreciate you leading this charge and making our state and our country a better place. So thank you for being here. Any other questions for the General? All right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
this
sir.
is Senator David Yates. I logged on just a few minutes behind. I didn't want to interrupt the speakers, but I did want to say thank you for your service. Thank you for what we're doing. And just my only question is, a lot of National Guard are student members, and a lot of times that they're taken out, they're not able to complete, or they miss a certain amount of days onto it. is the National Guard, are they supportive of legislation that would allow them to be able to get credits for the time that they're away?
Let me help me to answer your question, sir. So the credits to accumulate while they're away, are you talking about still studying via some type of a distance learning dynamic with their university, or credit for whatever experience their deployment gains for them?
General, no. I'm actually looking at other places, and some of our universities, whenever they are deployed, they miss a certain amount of days, and they're able to get, I guess, would be incompletes. And what is done in other places, I think that's gotten a rating for military as far as protecting your servicemen. They've said that in the event that you have been deployed or otherwise taken away from school, and that you're unable to complete a class, as long as you complete the majority of that class, they would consider your grade at the time you've been deployed. I know that you're having some trouble recruiting additional service people, especially for National Guard right now. We want to increase those numbers, and we also want to do everything we can to support these young soldiers. And I guess we could dip into a different area, but it's something I've been working on and looking at best practices throughout the United States and what's worked in other places, and see if that's something that you thought you'd be supportive of to help in your recruiting efforts, but also support these young men and women and making sure they complete their degrees. I know that it's got to be frustrating talking to some of them that they start, a few semesters, they get into halfway through a class, and all of a sudden they're taken away with the COVID response. They weren't able, a lot of them, to complete finals and do things, so they all got incompletes. Then you start back over again and again, which makes it very difficult to be able to get a undergraduate and graduate degrees. And so it's something I've been working on, and just wanted to see if you thought that would be something that would not only aid the men and women serving our country, but also in recruiting efforts.
Yes, sir. Straightforward conceptually, I'm right there with you. If any of our folks, soldiers, airmen, and not just Kentucky, but the Guard members from other states, can continue to work their education while deployed, I'm very much in favor of that. And there are specifics, and you probably know of some as well, where service members in a deployment, especially if it's more of a domestic deployment where the intensity isn't quite the same, but even in some cases where folks have deployed overseas, that they have been able to continue to work on classes in a DL or distance learning mode with whatever institution they've come from. But very much, if that can be done, I'm completely there with it. Just a couple things to share with you as well. And initially, this was a direction I thought you were going in. But what we've been able to do is when we've deployed folks, and for example, I'll use, since we were recently talking about the deployment to DC a few months ago, that all of the folks who went on that deployment, 100% of them, they were all volunteers for it. But we did not have to go and order or direct any individual to participate with that operation, that we were able to do so where they individually were able to work it out with their own personal schedule. So it didn't leave anybody in a lurch. And that also kind of ties into another aspect that you're alluding to as far as retention and our recruiting ability. Just one comment I'll make, and this may sound kind of redundant, because frequently I find that I'm saying something to the quality of the folks that we got in the Kentucky National Guard, and obviously I'm biased towards the Kentucky National Guard, but the quality of the recruiters we got. I was just earlier this morning speaking with an active duty sergeant major, and we acknowledged where the active duty Army did not make its recruiting goal this past recruiting year. In the Kentucky National Guard, we did make our recruiting goal. And there were only about 14 states in the entire country that made their recruiting goal. And I just present that as a testament to the quality of recruiters that we've got as well, that in spite of the pandemic environment, that they were able to find out other ways, whether it's social media as an example, or other mechanisms to still reach out and engage kids and their families. And yes, the recruiting dynamic is a concern, but quite simply here in Kentucky, our recruiters got after it and they did well by virtue of all of us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your service.
Thanks, sir.
General, once again, thank you for being here. I would attest it's part of the leadership too, so then that's why we're meeting some of our goals. So thank you for leading our great state, and we will go ahead and give you some time off. Please don't get shot out there, and stay safe, and we will look forward to hearing from you at a future date.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I greatly appreciate the time to share with you all about some of your men and women in the National Guard.
Thank you, sir. All right, we're going to move on to our next item. It's right at 11 o'clock. So we have 3 bills that are kind of in the process that we're working on, and we're going to try to allot maybe about 20 minutes for each to get everybody out here at lunchtime here. So Representative Randy Bridges, District 3, he's been working on this from last year.
What was your observation of it?
Members, notice in your packet that it actually has the bill that was filed last year, and then also has kind of a...
So I don't know if that was at my end or their end.
Hold on one second.
Everything was smooth.
General Lamberton, can you mute that mic?
And then, fortunately,
top secret stuff.
When it
So
did
we
kick off, it was while the other person was on the screen, so you just basically...
General Lamberton.
So,
can we mute it? I think we got it. All right. So we're saying we do have, it looks like copies of last year's bill, and Representative Bridges, I think there's one that's hot off the press for this year for discussion purposes also.
Yes,
I don't believe it has been pre-filed yet, but at least it has a few changes, and you might be able to note those. So the floor is yours, sir. Please introduce your guest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. I appreciate the opportunity here to share with you BR 74. We haven't filed it this year, but it was formerly House Bill 46 that I had the privilege to introduce to the House committee back in the 21 session. And it was late in the year and everything, but I appreciate the opportunity to share it then and again today. This is about an act relating to swimming pool safety standards, better known as what we've become to call Ava's Law. And before I get into the details, there is a story to be told, and it's not my story. I have with me today Carrie and Brian Jenkins that are with us via virtually, and they're here to share a story that brought about this bill and the need for it. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Carrie and Brian Jenkins.
good morning.
Good morning. I'm Carrie, and this is my husband, Brian. 23 months ago, we lost our 2.5-year-old only daughter, Ava Grace, to a drowning accident at our next-door neighbor's above-ground pool. As you can imagine, the last 23 months have been a complete nightmare. Our world has absolutely been shattered. After we lost Ava, I started to do some research, and it was so disheartening when I found out that in Kentucky, there are no laws, state laws, for residential pools for any type of safety barriers, especially when the leading cause of death for children under the age of 5 is accidental drowning. So our hope is that with this law, we know that it has the ability to save so many innocent children, just like Ava. And if we can just prevent one family from enduring the amount of heartache and suffering that we've had to endure, then we feel as though her death would not have been in vain.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Brian. I appreciate your brave testimony and opening your personal lives up to the people of Kentucky, and I know it takes a lot of courage, and I appreciate that. I met Carrie and Brian at an October bonfire back 2 years ago, or right after this happened. It's a few months, and their story broke my heart. and I've done some research, and I'm grateful that I got to be careful. LRC and I have done research, and I want to boast on the great people of LRC that has worked behind the scenes. But this is this is an important issue before us today. Just so you know, of the 50 states, 30 states have laws concerning residential swimming pools. Right now, Kentucky's only laws address commercial pools. So I believe there is a need. To give you a few stats, and Carrie shared some, drowning is a leading cause of unintentional deaths of children under 5 years old. Of children under the age of 14 years old, 77% of them are under the age of 5. So it's the youngest, the most vulnerable that are at risk here. And with that, we have 30 states, including 3 of Kentucky border states, that have laws that address. I'm sorry, there's an echo from this computer here in my ear, but we have 3 bordering states that have residential swimming pool laws, and then as I said, Kentucky laws only address commercial pools. Look back, my goal is not to be hard on the citizens who own swimming pools in the state of Kentucky, but we do have an obligation to protect our young. And we have, with the help of LRC staff, we've been able to narrow it down to 2 primary reasons. That is barriers, the number one reason, and the other is main drains, where young children get sucked to the bottom of the pool around a drain playing or diving to pick things up, and they get caught down there and can't get back up. The fortunate thing is federal laws address main drains through the Virginia Ground-Baker Act back several years ago to require any new pools to require a pressure disbursement system where there's not pressure on one place to hold a child underwater like that. Our law in addressing that is asking that any pool, that all pools would have to adapt to that new main drain cover. And I've talked to several different swimming pool people. Nearly all the new drain covers, even to retrofit older drains, require to meet the Virginia Ground-Baker Act. However, there are some old inventory out there that can be obtained that's pretty cheap, and what I'd like to do is require all main drains to cover that. And then the other part is a barrier system. Just so you know, an above-ground pool, this would address above-ground pools, spas, temporary pools, or in-ground pools. And I know that Representative Tackett last year had some questions about above-ground pools. Most standard above-ground pools are at least 48 inches tall. So if they are 48 inches above ground, that's the height of the barrier, and the side of that pool would qualify as its own barrier. So there would be no additional cost to that. The big thing is addressing entry into the pools and access. With above-ground pools, safety ladders now, there's all of them that are being produced now have either a removable, lockable device that will prevent entry into a pool from that ladder. And the intent of this bill is for those type instances, it's just simply make a law that says you have to follow the manufacturer's advice so that will either be removed or locked to prevent a young child of this nature. And since then, I've become aware of a couple of more deaths in the past year. I think there's one around the Seabury area and then one over in, I think, east central Kentucky. And it's just a tragedy. I'll open up to questions. I know we're tight on time and everything, but I just want to tell you how much I appreciate to be able to get this before you. I feel like that if we could implement just the skeleton foundation to protect these children from pools, it would be vitally important. And the cost to the individuals that have these pools, I think it is commensurate with the type pool they're putting in. If they're putting in a big, expensive in-ground pool, then the fence system around that it's going to take would be a percentage that'd be reasonable to their affordability. If it's an above-ground pool and just basically following the guidelines, it's already set in place. It's there, just telling people they have to abide by them, because the neighbor, and let me say this, the neighbor had no intent of harm to Miss Ava Grace, but if there'd been a law in place, their ladder imprinted said, "Please remove after use." If we'd had a law there, and they had known about that, and it had been followed, she'd still be with us. So it's not a very invasive or thing that we're asking here. And I have asked for fiscal analysis, and I haven't got that back yet, but we are in that process of getting that too. So I'll open it up to questions. I don't mind going through the bill. The changes we made from last year to this year are very minor. We do have the Pool and Spa Safety Association that has worked with us to massage it a little, but honestly, when I had to put the bill side by side and watch it word for word for what's been changed, and it's just some massaging on it. So there's not a great deal of different than the committee sub we presented last year. So thank you.
Thank you. We do have a couple questions, but I do want to say to Carrie and Brian Jenkins out there, I know you kind of shortened your description, but this only took minutes. I mean, your eyes, can you elaborate a little bit? Because I think you did at last session in front of the committee, but elaborate just a little bit. This is something that it's not something, well, go ahead in your own words.
Carrie, you're muted.
Can you unmute, Carrie?
Sorry. It was just 2 minutes, and she got away. And because there was no fence, she was able to climb the ladder and jump in. And it was just a tragic accident. And if only there had been a fence or a gate, or if the ladder had been removed, like it said on each step, then there's no way Ava could have climbed it.
I'm sorry. We are so sorry for your loss.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I can explain it. I'll save them the anguish of having to go through that
that's...
again. But I can tell the committee that, and Brian and Carrie understand this. I have talked to our county sheriff that oversaw the investigation. They were completely investigated. There were some hard questions asked, and there's been a lot of hard innuendos on social media about you need to take care of your child. You need to pay more attention. If it was yours, why should I have to put something on my pool to protect that? This couple has, as was put before, been through hell and back over losing a child of this young age. And my county sheriff, I trust him with everything. And in his own words, he said, "Randy, they've already suffered enough." He said, "This was not intentional. It was not their fault. It's simply a 2-year-old toddler that you blink and they disappear, and you have to go hunt for them." And so, for those that may have questions of that nature, I just want to let you know and we've talked about this, and they have been subject to some very cruel and harsh accusations, not by the police, but by social media and everything when we released this last year. And I can assure you this could have happened to me and my grandchildren. I've got a granddaughter this age. This past Sunday, I was out, and my wife told me, she said she knew this was coming up. She said, "Pull in up here." And we pulled into a cemetery, and I got to see the monument for Ava Grace. And if we can save just one child, this will be worth it. But there's so many more out there that could be very easily, their death can be prevented if we can just act. So I'll open it up to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And thank you, Mr. and Ms. Jenkins. We do have a couple of questions. Representative Bratcher.
This happened to friends of ours, I guess about 10 years ago. The cutest little boy you ever saw just went down the street, two doors within minutes, and was found in the swimming pool of a neighbor. Now, here's my question. We have in Louisville, there's homeowner groups that have these regulations if you're going to build a swimming pool. And I know of one that the person just absolutely refuses to put any kind of safeguards, even though his homeowners group tells him he has to do it. They're back and forth with court, blah, blah, blah. But what kind of, if this law passes, what would be the ramifications if somebody just refused, or even if they unintentionally didn't do it right or whatnot? Is this a criminal or a civil thing? Explain all that, Randy.
Thank you, Representative Bratcher. At this time, if and I can send you a copy of the bill at the end, there are punitive damages, $50, minimum $50 up to $100 a day that will go up. And I think the statute it falls under limits that to $1,000, but we're looking at maybe changing that too, because there are, what you said, there's homeowner associations. There's also some county and city zoning or ordinances that's been put in place to protect this, but there's nothing statewide that gives it any teeth or anything, and it's just left up to the individual communities. Now, there have been some exceptions to this added to this bill, so that you understand. I had one gentleman from Central Kentucky called and said, I've got a $15,000 automatic pool cover. When I get out of that pool, I push that button, it closes. You can play football on it. Why should I be forced to put a barrier around that fence? And there is exceptions for those kind of pool covers in this bill. Another exception, there's, you get a lot of rural areas, and I've had farmers contact me and say, if I have to do that around my pool, I'm going to have to do it around every pond on my farm. So we went back, we looked at some other regulations in taxing districts and everything, and we found the 10-acre aggregate for farmland, and we've actually added that to that exemption. So if you're in a rural area, there's not houses close, and you've got 10 continuous acres with your property, then you would be exempt. So we have, I hate to say this, and Brian Carrie, I promise you I'd fight for you every bit of the way, but we have made certain parts of this law pretty lenient with those exceptions, just to I would like to say, if we can't save all of them, we can save most of them, and this will be targeted for high density areas, subdivisions. Even in rural areas, you have subdivisions where people live together, close together and everything. That's what we're targeting, to protect a child from getting loose and just going 2 houses down into a pool that's not protected. And by the time you get one out of your prayer for that, that amount of time, it's too long, and that barrier, the thing. But I don't know if I answered your question completely, Representative Bratcher, but I will get with you later on to help go in detail, and perhaps you have some suggestions on how we could do more to force them to do that.
Thank you. I hope this bill passes. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. We do have a few more questions. We'll have to kind of keep things moving here. Representative Gooch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Bridges, for this. And there's no question that this bill is needed. I recently, as you mentioned, had someone in my county in the Seabury area, a young child that drowned as well. For 16 years, I was in the property and casualty insurance business, and I can tell you that I would never have written a homeowner's policy on a home with an in-ground pool that didn't have a fence around it. It just was too much of a liability to take, and I just wouldn't have done it. I think you answered I had a question, but I think you answered it. But I remember a few years ago we had a bill similar to this, and I think the big issue that came up that prevented it from passing at that time was the rural property where a house could have a pool behind it, and it sits way off the road on a several acre site. Might have a pond or a lake somewhere close by as well, and so I think it's good that you are making that exception in this, because there are circumstances where it wouldn't be feasible to do that. So certainly appreciate you bringing this bill, and I look forward to supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I do have a comment. Actually, for the insurance side of that, the neighbor's insurance company had not been notified they'd put the pool in. They didn't know this was an above ground pool, and so their insurance voided their policy for that action. So it is something. There are measures out there, but there's just no teeth to anything to where people know they have to do something.
We'll go ahead and jump to Representative Duplessis, since he is showing a picture of his grandchild and his furry grandchild. So go ahead.
And the furry grandchild hates the water. The little one there loves the water. So I am sensitive to this pool issue. And in fact, Representative Bridges, one of my questions I think you just answered from Representative Bratcher, and that was safety pool covers. I've actually been approached by a constituent asking me about that, if they could do that in lieu of a fence. And it sounds like your bill would allow that, as long as it is a safety cover that's in place and operative, I guess is the case, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then my second question is this, and this might seem like a negative, and I'm not trying to be negative against your bill because I do support it. But I am a little bit concerned about two things. One, retroactively requiring folks to put in the drain diffusers. That I don't know what that costs, but I do think that would be something that is unusual for us to go back on something that was approved to be done. We don't do it for electrical changes to anything that, the electrical code or the water code or any of the building codes. So it's kind of odd that we would do that for this. And that includes a lot of things like GFIs on houses in the bathroom. We can't go back and make a homeowner put those in, even though those are quite a safety device. So that leads me to my second question regarding those diffusers. I do know the children, it's a bad deal. I know people in my district that have lost a child to a pool, but no child that I've heard of in a residential pool, which is different than a public pool. Public pools have very large suction lines. They're moving literally 500 to 1,000, sometimes more than 1,000 gallons a minute of water through their drain diffusers, whereas a homeowner's pool is more like 75 gallons a minute. It's very small. There's not much suction. It's not something that's going to hold somebody down, I don't think. And I would just like to know if you have any data that shows that in residential pool deaths, it was due to somebody being held down due to suction in the diffuser, or if it simply was a felon and a drowned.
I don't have specific data, but let me start off first saying that I appreciate the negative comments too. It can only make the bill better. So we want to look at that. There was discussion about the grandfather clause in that. Our concern is that if it's, especially with existing pools, that we do require them to be upgraded to some point where for the barriers, the ladders and things like this. Most pools, actually what most people don't know is I for a couple of years I owned a pool company and I installed swimming pools. And the trend is the new in-ground pools. They usually about a quarter or a 1 horsepower, 3/4 to 1.25 horsepower. Now it's not uncommon to put a 2, 2.5, or 3 because there's so many more luxury devices they're adding to these pools, fountains and different things that require the bigger horsepower. That was my thought coming from a background in pools, a little background in pools, and that was it. But the retroactive, I wouldn't have a problem of looking at maybe grandfathering something in, but all the new replacement covers, even for old main drains, they have to meet the federal Virginia Ground Baker Act. So it's already in place. I was just trying to keep from old stock being used and try to, there again, just in here trying to take the opportunity to prevent this from happening. But I'd be more than glad to discuss an amendment or something to it down the road if you and help me out.
Maybe something like this, Representative Bridges, and since you're in the pool industry, you would know better than me. I'm in the water treatment industry, but it's a little bit different. When you put a new liner in a pool, I'm guessing that would be a time when you would change main drains and main drain covers and all that kind of thing. Maybe it's part of whenever you do that type of big maintenance, new liners, would that be the time that they'd be required to update it? You know,
It could
that
be.
would be something.
I'd be open to discuss.
I don't think we can enforce every pool in our state to upgrade and to enforce it. It's just it'll get lost in the wash, and therefore will be watered down and won't have the effects you want. But maybe if it's part of an upgrade to your pool, you have to upgrade to the modern standards. Just a thought.
Okay, I appreciate those.
Not saying what we should do. Just a thought. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. We do have 2 quick questions. I'm hoping they're quick. Representative Hart, you got a bunch of firefighters out there looking at you, so make it quick.
It is quick. In your bill draft, you subsection 5 6, portable swimming pools shall be emptied after each use. Just a thought as I was reading this, some of the new Intex brand swimming pools, like at Walmart and places like that sell, they're bigger than what we would consider a kiddie pool. I'm wondering if you might want to maybe put a gallon rating on that to some way, because some of the bigger Intex pools, they'll hold a couple hundred gallons of water, and so it's not as easy for the parents or the owners to empty them and fill them back up after each use. But they also come with covers, so you might put maybe a gallon rating in there or something to address that.
We could look at that and see.
Yeah, it's more of a suggestion than a question, but
no, I understand. And some of the idea is on the health side. A lot of these small pools and everything, they leave them out there.
Yeah.
There are some that will use wading pools for dogs, and they get a lot of bacteria. They're infestations of mosquitoes, and they're a health hazard. So part of that, we did try to think widely on this of other aspects that this might help, and that's one of the reasons. But they do have the covers, and they do.
Yeah. And I'm supportive of your bill. I mean, as a pool owner, I think this is very needed. I mean, when I put my swimming pool in, that was my biggest concern, because I had a lot of kids that lived on my street. I actually put 2 fences. I put a 5-foot fence around my house or my backyard, and then a 4-foot fence around the pool itself. So I think it's very needed. So I'm very supportive, just thinking out loud to make it better.
Thank you.
All right. Right now we got last question, Senator Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be as quick as possible here. Representative Bridges, I appreciate your bill very much. My son, fortunately for us, when he was a toddler, it was his grandmother's pool, and had his uncle not been walking by and seen him underwater with his eyes open, looking up and his hands up, he would have drowned that day. I get choked up thinking about it. But my comment is that you have 120 days that this, once it goes into effect, and I believe that's in subsection 2B, or E, that's what it is. As far as pool notification, cover all the pools based on what Representative Duplessis said. I think this, when you try to get this word out, because certainly people don't follow us up here like we think they do.
Right.
There has to be some kind of notification process to get this out. And I think that needs to be somewhere in the bill, who's responsible for that and how they go about getting the notification to pool owners. And that's my comment. Thank you.
I appreciate that comment, Senator Wilson, and I am making notes, because that's why I wanted to bring a bill draft rather than a pre-filed bill to this committee to take your suggestions and listen to them. The 120 days, it is questionable. I think the big thing is for new installation on in-ground pools, or they're building a deck or something, to give some kind of variance. And I have talked to some contractors and stuff, and they say usually 120 days should be sufficient to give them to do that. We could possibly give 6-month notification for existing pools or something. It's something that we've toyed with already to give proper notification. And then another thing that we've looked at putting in this bill is to require all pool sales retailers to for a certain amount of time to give notices to pool owners when they're buying parts or something. My concern is I don't want to be overburdening with this law so that people fight it and want it, because these young lives, I'm willing to be flexible, because if we can just, as I said before, if we can save one life, it's worth it. And we got to eat this elephant one bite at a time, is what I hear a lot of the different legislators say. So I don't want to come full bore with barrels blazing, to be honest with you, and try to at least get a simple law into effect that we can look at and then over time readjust and everything as sessions come forward. But I appreciate your input, and I take it in under advisement and look into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. We're out of questions. We do appreciate you being here and starting the discussion. Anyone still have any questions for him? We all know how to get in touch with Senator Bridges there, or Representative Bridges. Sorry about that. And we do want to thank Carrie and Brian. Thank y'all for both being here. We're so sorry for your loss, and a lot of us have kids and grandkids, and we can imagine. So you're in our prayers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to our next topic. Sorry to keep y'all waiting, and I feel all these firefighters were really keeping waiting, but hopefully y'all can bear with us for one more bill we're going to discuss. And Representative Josh Bray, if you want to take the stand. If you have any guests out there, you're soloing it. So, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. I'm here today to talk about BR 171, which is a Second Amendment protection bill. And what BR 171 does is it prohibits the enforcement of a federal ban or regulation on firearms and declaring an emergency. We've seen over the past few months some rhetoric coming from Washington that has alarmed several of my constituents. Outside of unemployment issues, this is probably the thing that I get the most emails about. But, quotes from the president like, no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. Or if you want or think you need to have weapons to take on the government, you need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons. That has caused great concern throughout the Commonwealth. And so what I have here is a bill that is modeled after the state of Montana's. They are one of the 17 other states in the country that have passed similar legislation. 113 out of 120 of our counties have passed resolutions very similar to this. And what this does is it prohibits taxpayer money from going towards the enforcement of regulations, bans, weapon bans, accessory bans after January 1, 2021. So this would be retroactive. We have a duty to uphold the Constitution, and to me, the Second Amendment is pretty clear. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And what this bill does is it would put Kentucky in with the 17 other states that have passed similar measures. It's pretty simple. I'd love to take your all's questions. I know we've got a room full of firefighters right behind us, and if there's one thing I've learned in working with fire departments is you don't keep them waiting. So,
all right. Well, everyone has the bill in front of them, or the bill request right now, and you said it has been filed?
It has.
It has. So it's a pre-filed bill. If there's anyone wants to co-sponsor, right now it's a pretty quiet group. I think. I don't know if that's in show of support or they know. Oh, we got Representative Wheatley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for bringing this for discussion. And this is a very discussion, and I don't expect to get in much of a legal battle with this, but I think this kind of bill obviously has language in it that says if any part of it is struck down, the rest of the bill still remains. And that is usually language that we have some expectation of there being a legal battle. So I think the legal questions that have come up with these kinds of bills around the state has to do with federalism, or where federal law preempts state law, which is in the Constitution prior to the amendments. Has there been any discussion related to how this is going to play out in the courts if there is a challenge to the law?
Absolutely. So in the Supreme Court made a decision in Prince versus the United States that affirmed the state's government's rights to not implement federal policy. So kind of, if you look at what's happening with marijuana regulations across the country, marijuana is still a federally controlled substance, but states across the country have decided to not prosecute those charges, which is why we see recreational medical marijuana and medical marijuana. So this follows under that same legal concept that states have the ability to choose which federal regulations to enforce. Now, this bill would not stop, let's say, the ATF or the FBI from charging someone with something down the road. Some new kind of regulation, whether it be an assault weapons ban, a pistol brace, which is being debated with the ATF right now. So there is a severability clause, but, kind of following current legal, what's going on across the United States with bills like this, I don't see that as an issue.
Thank you. I appreciate that analogy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Do we have anyone else? Any other questions or so? Well, thank you for getting us back on track for time-wise there.
No
we'll
problem.
look forward to hearing that later on in the regular session there.
Thank you all.
Thank you for being here. All right. Our last topic to the day today is our volunteer firefighter recruitment. And I will ask Representative McCool and Representative Ashley Tackett-Lafferty to come in. You have a bunch of guests. We do not mind if they want to come up and introduce themselves. But we'll leave it in your all's hand there. However you want to handle this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What we'd like to do, if we can, I'll just say a brief comments, and then I'll turn it over to Representative Tackett, and then we'll have some people come up and talk to you about the volunteers. Is that okay? And then we'll finish up. Representative Tackett and myself will finish up. Is that okay?
That would be great. Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you again for this opportunity. And may I ask who are I'm getting some feedback on this thing or something. Who are the volunteer firefighters? There are people in our community who are dedicated to our community. There are teachers, there are business owners, there are employees of all walks of life. They are the ones who is called out by tone late at night or any time during the day or the weekend to answer all types of emergencies, regardless of the weather or the situation that they're in. Basically, they are the heartbeat of the community.
Representative McCool, if you want, I was just told, I think we can shut that laptop. Okay. I believe we have a duplicate. Maybe they'll take away. Just go ahead and close it. Maybe they'll turn that off without losing everyone out there. So that might help you.
Well, I want to begin by sincerely thanking both of our chairman and Representative Bobby McCool for their willingness to bring this very important topic before other members of the General Assembly. In rural Kentucky, we are very dependent upon our volunteer firefighters. We rely upon our volunteers to help manage the safety and the health of our community through both good times and bad times. In addition to fire safety, they serve our rural communities in so many ways. We call upon them to keep our homeowners insurance affordable, our community events safe, for emergency rescue situations, and for emergency medical treatment. With all the duties that we ask of our community members to volunteer, unfortunately, most of these departments often operate on shoestring budgets. This makes recruitment and retention even more difficult for them. As an attempt to address this problem, the past few sessions, I've actually filed a bill for a tax incentive for $1,000 for active volunteer firefighters who have been certified by the state and who have completed their annual training each year. Last year, HB 61 had nearly 20 co-sponsors, and I want to say thank you to everyone in this room who signed on as a co-sponsor, because many of you are here today, and I appreciate, and we all appreciate that support. Today we have brought quite a few distinguished guests, and I do know that we're tight on time, so I'm trying my best to keep this brief because I'd really like for you to hear their stories today. So at this time, I will go ahead and turn it over so they can tell you a little bit about the problems and maybe their solutions as to how we can address their recruitment and retainment issues in our rural areas. Thank you.
If any of y'all want to come on up and please, I know this sounds funny, but when you sit down or stand up or talk or anything, please introduce yourself for the record if you would.
The mic's on, so just introduce yourself.
Well, I guess I'll start. My name is Brian Jeffers. I appreciate the chairman and the committee for hearing us today. I'm Deputy Chief of W.R. Castle Fire and Rescue. We're an all-volunteer department located in Johnson County. And I would say that, Representative Tackett is on the mark. We are really facing staffing struggles. We have problems. As the economy has struggled, especially in eastern Kentucky, people are moving away to work. We have people working away on pipelines, other types of work. We've lost a number of volunteers to that. Family commitments, people working multiple jobs, and all those things continue to build and create pressure on us as our staffing gets thinner and thinner and as we have to do more and more. This spring, we really went through the gauntlet, as many of y'all know, as Eastern Kentucky experienced. We went from an ice storm to flash flooding. And then my department in particular, we had a fatal structure fire immediately after all that, and it just felt like we were on the go all the time. We don't complain. That's what we signed up for. It's what we've trained for. But we do face a lot of challenges to keep personnel when that call volume continues to go up. We run 140 to 170 calls in a typical year as a fully volunteer department. The training, we try to meet every single week. We do meet every single week to train for around 3 hours. But then it's time to look at the checkbook, and we think about our funding situation. And we have the Kentucky Apple Festival there in Painesville, and of course last year it was canceled due to the pandemic, but in a normal year we operate a concession booth through the entire festival for a span of about 48 hours just to raise money for the ordinary things, not for an exciting new project or for flashy uniforms, but to keep the lights on, to keep the fuel in the trucks. There are a lot of the funding mechanisms that we've traditionally relied on. We've received grants for 4 different trucks during the time that I've been with W.R. Castle. 3 of those have been USDA grants. Those grants no longer exist. The 4th was a FEMA grant, a very highly competitive grant that we were able to get. So we continue to see fewer options for funding the department, which forces us to do more to try to raise money in other ways. And then we see more strain on our personnel for the demands that are placed on them in their personal lives, just to have time to devote to the fire department. In terms of bringing in personnel, obviously the money would be a big thing. If we had better funding, we would have that requirement, that burden shifted off those volunteers and potential volunteers. But I think anything we look at would be helpful at every level of the age. I know I started in the fire service, September 16th will be 30 years. I was 17 years old, thought it was the coolest thing ever. And because I started out at that age, I was able to get certified, become an instructor, become an emergency medical technician, and get all that behind me before I had family commitments. But so we need things to draw in people at that level because it has made me a firefighter for life. But we also draw in people at other ages, so we need to look at things that we can do at every age and across every part of the demographic spectrum that will help us to recruit personnel. I appreciate everyone's time and attention today, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that anyone has.
I tell you what, I don't see any questions right now. So, gentlemen, would y'all like to say a few words? And maybe by then the questions will start coming there.
Yeah, my name is Michael Howdy Kurtzinger. I represent the Kentucky Firefighters Association. We represent firefighters, both paid and volunteer, across the state. I just retired in April from the Kentucky Fire Commission, and so this is an issue that I've dealt with since 2003. We have filed a bill. Our Representative Tackett Lafferty's filed a bill for the tax incentive for the volunteers. That bill actually been filed over the last 10 or 15 years and never has moved at all. Just to give you some numbers, I talked to the Fire Commission yesterday. When I started in 2003, we had 17,000 volunteers, a total of 23,000 firefighters in the state. As of yesterday, there's about 12,000 volunteers in the state and about 4,500 paid career firefighters. Of that 12,000, a lot of those are career firefighters who are available on their days away from the regular fire department. That makes it a less number at certain times of the day and certain times of the career. Some of the enhancements I think that we've talked about at the KFA is that many of the departments don't have any resources for doing any marketing or any recruitment just because of the amount of money that they have. A lot of departments, I think when I was at the Fire Commission, we did a study and the average amount of money that a volunteer fire department has is less than $25,000. $11,000 of that is a state aid that they get from the Fire Commission under the state aid program. If we could build in some incentives such as the tax credit, and when we talk about tax credit, if you only have 12,000, and we were talking, Representative and I were talking yesterday, only about 7,800 of those 12,000 are actually certified, because it takes a couple years for those people to get certified, and then of that, they have to get 20 hours of additional training each year. That's a requirement by KRS, and the Kentucky Fire Commission SFRT staff, they train. Last year they trained 85% of the fire department. So we're putting the training out there. It's just trying to get the people to make sure we attend. I think one of the other important things is looking at the funding that's going towards recruitment and retention across the whole state. So if there's any questions, I'll try to answer them. If not, I'll let the sheriff talk.
I'm Greg Motley. I'm sheriff in Morgan County. Representative McCool he and I have spoken at numerous times about what we do and how we do it every day. And to be quite honest, we couldn't do our job on a daily basis without our volunteer firemen. We have 6 fire departments, separate fire departments within our county. It's about a 380 square mile county. I have a very small staff of folks. At any given time, 1 or 2 deputies on duty. Generally, I'm not just an administrator. I'm out working recs. I'm out at fire calls and things like that. And I see these folks, even though my guys may not make a lot of money, but we are paying them. But I see these folks out there every day, day and night, answering medical calls to help the ambulance people load up people, taking their AEDs that they've that the local departments have raised money to have to get to a call quicker ahead of the ambulance, because in many cases it may be 25, 30 minutes for us to get an ambulance to folks. So these volunteers are running to the firehouse, grabbing AEDs, getting out there, and all these folks they all have jobs. And so they're out there all night, and then they're up going the next day to the school to be a teacher, or at the prison to work, or wherever. So I know, as he was saying, they get about $11,000 a year, and then I think our county funds their insurance for their trucks. And beyond that, everything else is done through fundraising. And I know personally, my wife and I support all of our local fire departments and have long before I became sheriff, because we've never had the opportunity to live anywhere where there was a tax base or anything to support firefighters. We've always lived in an area where there were rural volunteer firefighters. So I just would like to just tell you that, from my standpoint, from a law enforcement standpoint, in a very rural area, in a very low populated county, we need these folks, and we're very supportive of anything that we can do to help recruit people to do it, keep them trained, because I know it's a tedious job for those guys to not only raise money, but then to try to have all their training and all that. So again, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let me go ahead and open this up. Is there anyone else out in the audience that would like to come up and sit and say anything? Y'all feel free. This is your chance. Y'all don't go far because we do have a question, but yes.
We have a lot of experts back here.
You do, and I wanted to give them ample time to speak or so, and I think we do have one or two questions here. So please introduce yourself. And
my name is Les Stapleton. I'm the mayor of Prestonburg, Kentucky. And Mr. Chairman and committee, I want to thank you all for allowing me to come speak about volunteer firemen. Although we have a paid fire department, our numbers are, I want to make sure I got it right, so I wrote it down. We have 14 full-time, 8 part-time, and we have 21 volunteers. So you're talking about 22 that we pay and 21 volunteers. Those volunteers, even though we have a paid staff, they're invaluable to us. So that is my take on it, and they're helping us with accidents. If we have a fire, there's as many of them there as we have paid personnel. Festivals, the general was talking about working festivals, helping with traffic and stuff. They help us take care of that stuff. They help our small city keep moving, and that's very important to us. But I also can speak to you as a police officer, just like Sheriff Motley was. When I was a young trooper, and this is back in the mid-'80s, so it's quite some time ago, there was a lot of areas that only help you had was the volunteer fireman. If you had a wreck in the middle of a curve, and you're trying to direct traffic and work a wreck, you didn't have any help because there was no other police officers out. As Representative Fugit and Representative Blank can testify, when we were working in the mid to late 80s, there wasn't enough troopers to go around. So we didn't have help, but the volunteer firemen were there. They were there on accident scenes. They were there when we had things going on. And they're invaluable to police officers in rural areas. And I understand that some of the people from the larger cities and stuff don't really understand the volunteer program. But the volunteer program is so valuable to all the rural areas out there.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. It is very important, and we do have a question. I do want to say that although we are reviewing this and looking at this in this committee, this will be something that we'll have to probably go through A&R. I mean, doing the quick figures, 7,800 certified members would be at a cost of $7.8 million, and of course on up to $17 million or so. So this is something that I highly recommend. Talk to Senator McDaniel on the other side, and then also talk to Senator or Representative Petrie, and let's see if we can get it heard in A&R this year. Unfortunately, this is about as far as we can go in this committee, but let's go ahead and keep discussion going. And Brother Fugit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a couple questions, and before I ask the question, to what Mayor Stapleton, Trooper Stapleton said, volunteer firemen helped me out every day when I was on the road as a trooper, directing traffic. They'd go take care of the people first, get them sent to the hospital, then they turned into traffic police officers. I mean, they really helped us every day, and I appreciate all their work. The Mountain Firefighters Association, I think, is having their training this weekend in Hazard at HCTC. So I got a question as far as, and I know that the funding for the volunteer fire departments is basically whatever they can raise. So I got a question: Do paid volunteer fire departments get a fee from insurance companies? Let's say if a house catches on fire, they got fire insurance with Farm Bureau. does Farm Bureau pay that paid department a fee for responding to the house to put the fire out?
I know someone who does.
I think I could answer that, and that we can bill for some of the items some of the resources we use. Yes, sir.
Okay, now, does the volunteer fire departments have that same ability?
I'd have to step back on that.
I can answer that. Yes. All fire departments volunteer are paid when they respond to a call. They can bill the insurance company, or in some cases, they will bill the individual that just lost their house.
Is there a set fee for the insurance companies that they have to pay, or is it?
Most of that is set by the local communities. It would be either the fire district board, if it's a municipal fire department, it'd be by the city council or the county, or in a case of just a normal volunteer fire department, the board or the command structure of that department could set their rates.
Okay. I do know that there's a big need for more volunteers, especially in the mountain area, because I think that we've got several in my county, in my district, that are serving on 3 different fire departments just so they can keep their numbers up where they're supposed to be. So whatever we can do to help incentivize them to be part of that family, volunteer firemen, I'm for that, and I support it. And I appreciate Representative McCool and Tackett Laverty for you bringing this to us.
All right. Thank you, sir. We do have another question by Senator Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You stole my question because I was going to ask, shouldn't this have to go through A&R? But one, I'm very supportive of this. Out in Western Kentucky, our volunteer departments are drying up just like through the whole state. And but just maybe a comment, if it does go through A&R, and the chairman already talked about the dollar figure that we might be looking at, maybe setting an annual amount on it, say, $1 million payout per year, limit those credits, something to get this stair-stepped in to where it's affordable for us, and maybe even targeting areas that are, maybe less, less volunteers than other areas for certain years, just things like that to help it get going. But I am supportive of the idea, and it's needed out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And right now, this is my last question, and it happens to be our co-chair, Co-Chair Embry.
Okay, mine's mostly remarks. I represent 4 counties in south central Kentucky, mostly rural counties. The volunteer fire departments are a very, very valuable part of our communities, and I'm very much aware of their financial problems. I've been to no telling how many in the last 20 years, fish fries, barbecue dinners, fish chicken dinners, so forth, as they try to raise the funds they need. I'm also aware it's very difficult, particularly now with COVID-19, to recruit new members because of their concerns about that and other concerns. The bill is somewhat difficult because of the financial part. I have supported similar bills like this during the past 19, 20 years. I will be supporting this one. I think it's very valuable, and I don't know how my counties would function without their volunteer fire departments. They are the major part of several rural communities in my district. I would like to thank Representatives McCool and Tackett Lafferty for sponsoring this. You'll have my support in the Senate, and let's hope this time maybe we can get this done. And that's my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Is there anyone else has any other questions? Y'all good? Thank you so much for bringing this, and thank you all for being out here and coming and spending quite a bit of the day with us. And I know a lot of y'all have a long way to travel, and y'all stay safe on the way home there. So,
Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
May I ask? We did have a lot of folks drive a very long way, and a lot of people who, they render a lot of very important services to our community. And I would really like, and I know Representative McCool would as well, if you wouldn't mind that we let them come up and introduce themselves.
That's why I was opening the mic to them.
Thank you.
Please do. If
Thank
y'all
you
would
very
like to come up, we've heard from 4 or 5, but please come up if you didn't get a chance to speak, and at least introduce yourself so we know you. Here's some sharp-dressed guys here.
There we go. Battalion Chief Mitch Case from City of Pikeville Fire Department. Also representative of Big Creek Volunteer Fire Department.
Thank you, sir.
Fire Chief Patrick Bentley, City of Pikeville Fire Department. Also volunteered for many years, and I've stepped away from my new role from volunteering because I have more responsibilities. So,
thank you for your service.
I'm Michael Brown, the Chief of the City of Prestonburg Fire Department, and also serve as Assistant Chief for Belfry Volunteer Fire Department. Thank you.
I'm James Allen. I'm the Code Enforcement Officer and Fire Marshal for the City of Prestonsburg.
Thank you.
I'm Nee Jackson, the Fire Chief of Belfry Volunteer Fire Department.
I'm Doug Tackett. I'm the Emergency Management Director and 911 Coordinator for Pike County, and I support our 22 volunteer fire departments.
Thank y'all. We appreciate y'all being here. Let's give them a round of applause. All right. Well, we right at 12 o'clock, lunchtime. Co-Chair Embry, is there anything you need to say or highlights the next meeting or so? Or
next meeting is September 22nd. Our meeting at 10. Okay, it'll be in this room. So
awesome.
we're working on a very interesting agenda. So I urge everyone to be present.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you being here. And if there's no other business, we